Hi, welcome to Alex Shares Knowledge. Thanks for checking out this channel. If you like this video or any of the videos I've made, please subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot to me. So the subject of my short video today is the revolutions in quantum physics and the revolutions in psychedelics. It turned out to be saying the same thing. And what I mean by that is some of the greatest minds in these fields ultimately concluded that there is no external reality separate from what our nervous system constructs from the signals it receives. So there is no objective external reality, which is a philosophical position in philosophy of mind known as idealism. And so if you understand much about the history of science, you'll know that the quantum revolution really was in the early 1900s. And by 1927, there was something called the Slovak Convention, I believe. If you Google the most intelligent photo ever taken, you'll see this famous classic photograph with some of the brightest minds that science has ever known all together in one picture, like Heisenberg, Bohr, Max Planck, Einstein, a bunch of other Nobel Prize winners. And at this convention, this is where they were discussing basically the fact that classical physics had been shattered by the new evidence in quantum science and quantum theory, which seemed to completely contradict everything we know about the lived day-to-day macro world, and Aristotelian logic, which is basically either or logic, which is a bedrock kind of classical Western thinking. So Max Planck, if you Google who is Max Planck, P-L-A-N-C-K, Google will show you he is the founder of quantum theory. And all of these men that I'm talking about, these scientists, they're not religious people. They're people who are dedicated to hard objective science and who are trained classically in a classic paradigm of the time, which was that materialism or physicalism, basically. And Max Planck even concluded as a man, near the end of his life, he said, as a man who devoted his entire life to the pursuit of the most rational, objective, clear-headed science, he had to conclude at the end of the day that all particles were essentially micro solar systems that were brought together and held together by the intention of some sort of conscious mind, some mind at large, and that for all intents and purposes, we might as well think of it as God. Sorry, I'm adding that end part on, but he basically said what he did say is we must infer the existence of an intelligent mind. So essentially ended up at sort of a place that gets into theology. The thing with science and religion is that if you push it far enough, like Da Vinci said, all things are connected. Sort of the distinction between theology and science will start to blur, because ultimately consciousness is a property of the universe, not an like a fundamental property of the universe. It's not an epiphenomenon of physical systems. So and if you're wondering why physicalism is still the dominant but shrinking paradigm of today, it's because there's a lot of psychology that's still at play with science. Even though science is meant to be an objective process with peer review and all that stuff, psychologists began to point out decades later that obviously scientists are still humans with biases, and that the more intelligent you are, the better you are at rationalizing your own neuroses and biases, and can come up with elaborate rationalizations for things that are quite convincing. So a lot of people still won't materialist science, and I understand why. One, the brain evolved to keep us alive for survival reasons, to have a strong sense of object permanence, or we're basically hardwired to believe that time and space are fundamental. But also people that grow up in a lot of overly religious environments or overly superstitious environments need something. Even some people who are neurodivergent will just the way they think need an objective way to communicate with people that's completely objective and verifiable and repeatable and stuff. The problem with materialism is that it's a historically relatively new position. None of our ancestors, as far as we can tell from the time of Neanderthals or primitive man till now, were atheist cultures. Even Neanderthals buried their dead facing, just the fact that they started to bury their dead is interesting, and then the fact that they were burying their dead facing east, which is where the rising sun is, suggests that they had some sort of metaphysical concept that early on. So Materialism, though, it's a relatively historically new thing, a few centuries old, but has already started to get smashed by the early 1900s by quantum physics. A lot of science, it becomes interpretive when you get down to like the double slit experiment stuff. So quantum physics there's no unified understanding of it because it's interpretive. However, I would also argue that by 1986, with Bell's theorem and Allen aspects, hidden variables, experiments to they'd essentially pardon me, through a series of more increasingly sophisticated versions of the same experiment, basically starting in the 80s with delayed choice quantum eraser experiments up until like 2014. They just refined this experiment to rule out any kind of hidden variable, which a lot of scientists, that's what multiverse theory, for example, is based on, a theory that has no objective evidence at all. It's completely a mathematical idea that it doesn't want to acknowledge, another model like idealism, which is according to it's a much more probable theory, so scientists should lean towards it. But anyway, if you're dedicated emotionally or for some other reason, career-wise, to materialism, you will insist on hidden variables must be affecting the double slit experiment or superposition. The way that superposition in quantum theory basically shows that things a particle can change over here and it can cause instantaneous changes to something else somewhere, which violates, the known laws of physics, because it would have to send some kind of signal transmission, and that doesn't happen. It just happens instantly, which on some deeper fundamental level, which is why the people have proposed like the holographic universe theory, for example, that these things must in somehow be unified, because instantaneous changes can occur to something at a distance when you change one particle in quantum physics, which is why it's so spooky and mysterious. So anyway, this whole thing with materialism and quantum physics and everything basically had already showed itself by the 1920s, and a lot of those minds, like Schrodinger, for example, it's interesting to point out they had a hard time interpreting a lot of things until they went to Eastern ancient Indian philosophy, like the Vedas, and Schrodinger specifically said reading the Vedas and their metaphysics helped him make sense of quantum physics, and he was in the end he believed that everything was unified, and probably because of the superposition and the results that he was seeing, that he believed that everything was one system, one holistic system with one sort of consciousness phasing in and out. So that happened, and then by the 1940s, a Swiss chemist named Albert Hofmann, who was also a classically trained Western scientist who believed in an objective reality, he had accidentally gotten high on an ergot derivative, which comes from a mushroom, which basically was LSD. He's the first one to synthesize it, and accidentally got high on it and started tripping, which sparked off the Psychedelic Revolution in the West. He had such a profound experience the first time he ever had LSD. It took him 40 years to put it into words, and then he wrote a book 40 years later, which he wrote. The main thing that he learned overall, in his opinion, from LSD was that there was no objective reality separate from us, that all we knew was the reality that our nervous systems were constructing for us out of signals they received. So I think a lot of other people reached the same conclusion on psychedelics, and then it's just more evidence that against materialism. So the quantum physics revolution in the early part of the 1900s, and then in the mid 1900s with the psychedelic revolution, we started to see more chipping away of the materialist paradigm. And even now, I would recommend that you check out the work of Donald Hoffman, who is I have to check his credentials, but he worked in computer science and I believe maybe neurology. He is proposing conscious agents theory and showing that time and space are not fundamental. His videos are worth checking out. Also, I recommend checking out Bernardo Kastrup's videos. I think analytical philosophy is really important when talking about consciousness, because the fact when I speak of idealism as a philosophy, or the fact that time and space are not fundamental, this can open people up to being prey to religions that are predatory, or new age scams and things like that. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the problems with new ageism and stuff like that. But in this video, I basically just wanted to point out that Albert Hofmann reached the same conclusion in many ways, that a lot of the early quantum physicists reached, in that the time and space are not fundamental, and that consciousness seems to be an inherent part of the universe. So I thought that was rather interesting, and I'll make a lot more videos on this topic. If you also find it interesting, please feel free to leave comments. Let me know, what do you think? Is consciousness just an epiphenomenon of something, brain activity, or is it a fundamental characteristic of the universe that's trying to express itself? Or how do you view the mind-body problem, and what do you think consciousness is? Love to hear from you. So thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.